For Sunday, February 11th, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, major tax changes may be underway at the General Assembly. There are two new health care bills, and in DeKalb County, a pay outrage by the commission. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us. We'll begin with the General Assembly because at the outset, all the pundits, that's us, and some other folks said, won't be much of a session. I mean, really, it's an election year. They just want to get in and get out. Well, all of a sudden, due to federal tax changes and due to the election, suddenly there's some substance. And I want to begin with the health care thing because that is an area of great need in the state outside the metro area in particular. And there are two bills. One involves service delivery, and the other attacks the problem of opioids. Phil, the service delivery piece is aimed more at rural Georgia, right?
That's right. And we've had a lot of problems with priorities and decision making, and we've talked about this on the gang a lot. And so this was very needed. It was endorsed by virtually a wide range of your healthcare professionals. And then, as you point out, that opioid bill is also very necessary too. And this is a crisis not just in Georgia, obviously, but nationally. And also a quick hats off to Chris Carr. He set up recently an opioid statewide task force to gather information from all the public and private stakeholders, and this has really been a big help so far.
I also noticed, Darren, that 5 counties are suing opioid manufacturers. I mean, there is a broad assault here.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, what you saw is probably about a year and a half ago, attorneys really kind of came to these 5 counties and presented this opportunity for them to really step up and to get involved in sort of a regional lawsuit around opioids. But to Phil's point, I mean, we've seen documentary after documentary specials about how this opioid crisis is just rampant, not just in Georgia, but all over. And so I agree. I think Attorney General Chris Carr and the legislature, they really deserve a lot of kudos here, because this is an uncomfortable conversation to have. But when you look at the families that were down at the Capitol these last couple of weeks, talking to legislators about how this addiction to this opioid drug has just ruined their families and just taking their loved ones away. I mean, it was just really pretty amazing just to hear these stories. Yeah.
Then the other area that I think is going to see some real substance is routinely the General Assembly passes a bill that adjusts to the federal tax code. Alexis, you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but it's going to be anything but routine this year because here we have the Republican majority saying we don't want a tax windfall.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, they want to be sure they're not accused of a tax increase. So they're going to figure out a way to get that money back to the taxpayers, maybe an income tax cut that Phil's mentioned a couple of times. What do you think, Alexis?
It will be interesting to see what they do come up with. In fact, my brother asked me about a tax cut that was in place prior to the recession for seniors, that you got so much of your taxes cut based on your age and your income. And
that'd be your older brother, right?
That would be my older brother, yes. And he said that Governor Deal did away with that tax cut. So perhaps they'll take a look at putting that back in. We'll see what happens there.
Now, speaking, while we're on the subject of taxes, there looks like they're going to restore the Delta Airlines tax credit for jet fuel, all the airlines, tax credit for jet fuel.
Benefits Delta.
I guess the Delta is a new and better light with them because of a new CEO.
Well, Ed Bastian, the CEO, is not attacking key lawmakers like his predecessor did, and that's very helpful.
Well, one of the things that I think that the Delta people wanted me to clarify is that it's not the Delta fuel tax that you just pointed out. It is the airline fuel tax. But
in Hartsfield, it's mostly Delta.
It is. Right. And I mean, Delta is very prominent there.
And they want Delta to add more international flights. I get that. But a little wrinkle this week that I was kind of surprised at the amount. Clayton County says it will cost them $18 million.
Well, that's
Clayton
right.
County's not exactly bursting with cash.
A lot of people don't know this. A lot of the airport is in Clayton County. Now, please tell your Delta friends, though, too, that these are some of the highest ticket rates in the nation here. So it would be nice if we can get a little, cut some slack for all of our tickets here.
Now, look at that. You asked them to, for some people to reduce prices. That's very interesting. Did you take Delta when you went to D.C. last week?
Yes, of course. I'm a flying colonel.
Oh, my goodness.
They don't have that anymore, do they?
Yeah, they do.
I still got my little card.
Yeah, I'm a flying
pulled
colonel.
it out in years.
That's a lot of
Ever since Dick
flying.
Anderson became COO or CEO, I decided that I'd rather be a flying corporal. Now, the adoption bill passed both houses, finally. We've talked about that a lot. Not much to add. Everybody's happy over it. It streamlines the adoption system. There is, however, a separate Senate bill that had a very contentious hearing Thursday, and it would allow faith-based agencies to continue to operate the way they have. And the homosexual lobby is very upset about that. I understand that.
I think it was a good compromise, if I could just, weigh in a little bit, because there were some differences and legitimate, points of view on, as we pointed out a couple weeks ago, how much do you pay during this adoption process for the mother-to-be? And there were some differences in the Senate and House. Some thought it might have gotten derailed, but it didn't. And I think that was a good case of a bipartisan compromise.
But there is that separate bill.
There is a separate bill, and I think that's wise. You can always, of course, we all have watched we're veterans watching the legislature. There's always that last-minute amendment. And the last 39th or 40th day, you got to watch out for.
Okay, so we're in the middle of this campaign, and I noticed that Casey Cagle has also made a broad proposal for rural broadband connections. And it was interesting. I don't know all the details. We'll have to watch this. That's also part of the federal budget, the 2-year federal budget that was agreed to Friday morning by Congress.
I have to say everybody's in favor of this, not just Lieutenant Governor Cagle. It's just the devil's in the details.
And then the last legislative thing I want to discuss is the brunch bill. It passed, finally, after several years of trying.
Cheers.
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 You can now tee it up at 11 a.m. on Sunday.
Right.
11 a.m. on Sunday.
Dilly.
With your Eggs Benedict.
Yeah.
And
That
those
was just
objections.
fairness. That was just a case of fairness.
Yeah, you mean compared to the World Congress Center?
Well, yeah, compared to all state facilities that had an edge over private restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, you had restaurant owners that, you saw the stories that Fox 5 did, that they literally had to change their hours because people will not come to their restaurants because they couldn't get a drink during that time, I think 11 to 12:30. And so now what it does is that it's a fair bill. It's something that, for a long time, Georgia didn't have a Sunday sales legislation. I mean, us in Indiana were like the last 2 states. And so what it really does is that, it gives opportunity for people to responsibly drink on Sundays, but also it really helps the small businesses that really need this traffic.
Well, yeah, and it is kind of not that I'm a big brunch guy, but, you go into a restaurant at noon expecting to have that Bloody Mary on Sunday.
Or a mimosa.
Or a mimosa. And they said, nope, you got to wait till 12:30. It's always struck me we were stuck in the past on that. But that's Renee Underman's bill, right? Senator from Northern Gwinnett.
Right, and Megan Hansen had it in the House.
There you go. All right, one last legislative item, and it's one of my pet issues. They are finally having hearings in the State House over drawing water from the Tennessee River. In other words, changing the boundary of North Georgia where it hits the Tennessee River to correct a surveyor's mistake made in the 18th century. I think this is long overdue, and it would solve all of our water problems. So I commend those in the House who are pushing that. The original sponsor, Harry Geisinger, died. So now we've got some new folks trying that. That's our water. Courts have ruled that. I mean, it really is pretty simple. And I don't know why there's such a fuss over it, but it is. All right, when we come back, we're going to look at naked greed on the part of the DeKalb County Commissioners. Greed unparalleled.
Oh, my goodness.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Sometimes news stories begin as stupid stuff, and then suddenly somebody sticks with it with a bad idea, and it just continues to gain steam. And that's the case in DeKalb County, where firefighters showed up at the commission expecting to lobby for a pay raise. Instead, they found the DeKalb commissioners circulating letters to the General Assembly asking for a monster pay raise. These are part-time commissioners, underscore the word part-time. They have full-time aides, underscore the word full-time. And yet they want to essentially double their salary. I forget the exact number there, and maybe it's like at the low end 70 grand, 68 grand, at the high end 90 grand.
Yeah, I think
something in there.
Yeah, what they're proposing
for part-time work.
Yeah, well, they are part-time county commissioners who commit full-time work every single week, even on the weekends.
They don't have to. But they have full-time aides. They don't have to do that.
At a time where DeKalb County is the 4th largest county in our state, it has roughly over 700,000 people that these county commissioners collectively have to represent, and they only have 2 staffers whereas some other counties like Fulton and others have upwards to 4 and 5 staffers. I think what they're saying is, let's just have a conversation about sort of a sliding scale that they see as sort of a getting on the train to really have a robust conversation.
They want to tie it to judges' pay.
Right, and so right now what they're saying, and I think the judges in DeKalb County make roughly about $190,000, and so what they're saying is that if they were to try to get 40% of that, I think it'll bump their salaries up pretty close to about $74,000 at a time where, if you can compare DeKalb County to Cobb, Gwinnett, and Fulton, they make 10% less than all of those county commissioners. And so it's not like they are just basically, making a point just for
but
the
isn't
cap.
that good? Isn't that good? Shouldn't the taxpayers appreciate that frugality?
Well, I think what the firefighters are saying is that, under the leadership of CEO Michael Thurman and the commission, they actually just got a recent bump, and police officers to 2 to 3%. But I think that this is a legislative process, and the legislature is going to have to continue to have this conversation about how do you justifiably pay part-time elected officials who work full-time hours.
But the old line, and I still stick to it, is don't run for the office if you don't like the salary. Now, I don't mind adjustments, as you're pointing out, in the future.
Right. But I think it's a little archaic, because for a long time in this state, if you were wealthy and you wanted to give back to public service, then the salary conversation never comes up. But when you have individuals who are committing themselves full-time to a job that they love and that is serving the public, I just don't think it's a wrong conversation to have about how we can really look at.
Well, I think Jeff Rader's point is that he can't make a living in the private sector because he's too busy with the public sector.
Well, but
so
also,
therefore, he should leave the public sector. That's pretty easy.
Well,
you want to feed your family, leave.
Well, the thing is, people are dedicated to public service, and they want to be able to serve the community. People have a gift for that.
I'm dedicated to this job. I really am. We've been doing it a long time, right?
Right.
Yeah, you do
Let's
a good
walk
job
upstairs afterwards and see if we can get paid full time for this. I mean, really, that's ridiculous.
You're
don't work
partially
full-time
right.
at this.
You're partially right. There are people that do noble public service, no question. But then the other side of the coin is people with no skills whatsoever. They can't get any job in the private sector, and they're on the public dole, and that's all they know. You know who they are in both parties or independents.
Well, the cure for that is to have them voted out.
Amen.
So, but I do
Amen.
think it is a good conversation to have about how you compensate public officials.
But you can't have what they've done in Atlanta and Fulton County. You cannot have, quote, part-time people with these huge full-time staffs. That's ridiculous.
But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that DeKalb County commissioners don't have this large staff that you're talking about.
They're two people.
But in places like Gwinnett, the chairwoman of Gwinnett makes the most money out of any county commissioner person. Rob Pitts in Fulton County, who's the chair, makes the same exact amount of money that the other fellow commissioners make as well. And so I think this is just not, I don't want to paint this stigma that DeKalb County is wrong for wanting the state legislature to really have a conversation about if you can get on the train and looking at these studies on how to get a pay increase. But now, at a time where you have hardworking police officers and firefighters who are saying that this is wrong, we need to be paid more, maybe the optics and the timing of it politically may be wrong.
And let me tell you, the firefighters have a beef. Let me just add this before I change the subject, because they're also understaffed. And Michael Thurman has admitted that. DeKalb has really, ever since Vernon Jones was elected in about 2000, DeKalb has gone precipitously down. Now they've got some new tax money. In Atlanta, I'll just give this a quick reference. The head of Invest Atlanta, the city's development arm, just got a new contract as Kasim Reed was going out the door. And she's going to make more money than Nathan Deal and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms combined.
That's ridiculous.
Is that proper? What are we doing with these salaries?
Dr. Eloisa Clementic is a hard worker who has
I'm
done
glad
it.
you said it, not I.
Yes, okay. I know her very well, and I think that if you look at all of these businesses that we have coming to Atlanta, it was a partnership. Of course, the governor, the chambers of commerce, the mayor, other had a lot to do with it. But
isn't
the person,
$390,000 a year?
Listen, I think that she deserves it. I think that she's hardworking. And Invest Atlanta is
Nobody
the
deserves
economic.
that but ball players
But
and CEOs.
it is the economic arm for Atlanta.
Of course it
Again,
is, but that's almost as much as what the president makes.
But again, I think it's important to look at the public sector service people as competitive with the private industry. if you want to get good people.
What does Governor Deal make? Isn't it 165,000?
Well, you're going to raise up a little bit more than that.
Yeah, but he doesn't have any expenses either. He's got a house and staff and everything. Come on, he's got all kinds of support.
There's a divide. This is a classic
That's a
Republican,
classic,
Democratic, conservative, liberal divide.
That's right. Yeah.
Pay the public servants, you know.
Bathe them in money.
But what we also agree, all four of us, is that you want to reward good behavior.
Why don't you wait and see?
Hold on. Do we not want to
see how the performance is before you reward?
Right, but that's my point. Is it's a merit-based performance increase, and I think we all agree that people should be paid if they work hard and they deliver. They should be compensated.
And you're saying that given the recent history of DeKalb County, those commissioners have earned pay for performance. They deserve pay cuts. That's the problem. I rest my case.
Okay.
These are part-time jobs, and they need to stay that way. Okay, when we come back, power politics in the governor's race, we'll take a look at fundraising totals, credibility, that sort of thing. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
A couple of quick items before we turn to politics. We should note that the General Assembly, Phil, has passed the approval of the Plant-Vogel pay arrangements, right?
Well, what I wanted to discuss is some good news from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C.
Well, that too.
Where the Congress has also passed an $800 million tax credit, which we desperately needed to keep the 2 nuclear units at Plant-Vogel going. So a lot of people had wondered about that.
Big win for Georgia, and our very own U.S. Senator Johnny Isaacson was very involved in this, and definitely
making that happen.
I want to thank you for that.
Kind of along those same lines, and I don't want to dwell on it, I was fascinated to see that the Georgia Ports Authority this week said they plan to double their capacity in 10 years. Now, I wonder, in that federal budget, that the 2-year budget was passed Friday, is there money for the Port of Savannah?
I saw
there
is some money. It's obviously never enough. You always, the whole delegation, by the way, of Georgia, you want to talk about bipartisanship, everybody is trying to push for funding. And so I have not seen, I don't know if you have there, and I've not seen an actual amount yet.
But Alexis, don't you think it's very strange? You've been doing this show for a long time. When President Obama, and there was a lot of big spending bills coming out, you know, I remember Phil and others talking about how this is just, this is outrageous, we shouldn't be doing it. But if you just look at the amount of spending that is in this recent legislation that the president...
It's disgraceful.
Wait a minute, I am going to say it's outrageous. It's disgraceful. Very consistent.
It was this bipartisan, it's so great.
Unlike the Democrats,
it's disgraceful and outrageous. That's right.
I just want to make sure
I hate that you missed that.
I didn't hear disgraceful in that narrative.
Our fiscal conservative credentials, I think,
I'm glad that they finally did a 2-year budget. I'm sad but outraged that the degree of spending is almost Obama-esque.
Well, and that's right. And I never heard the Democrats say that our military was being stripped over the last 8 years.
That's because the Republicans sequestered
No, it was the Obama kept cutting it, and we had to do the sequester. You know the whole history of that, Alexis. Finally, we're finally getting the needed money for our men and women in the armed services that were denied by Barack Obama.
That's the Phil I know. He's back.
All right, Alexis, I'll let you start with the governor's race. Stacey Abrams has impressive fundraising, but a problem. She's spending it.
Well, I guess it depends on the eye of the beholder, but I think that's part of her strategic plan, is to do the spending early on to prepare for getting the vote out. And she thinks, from looking at the practice of the Democrats in the last 2 or 3 sessions or election years, that they've all been holding their money to the end.
And preparing for runoffs and stuff.
And it hasn't worked, so she's taken a different tack.
But she has raised a good bit of money. Stacey Evans, on the other hand, is loaning herself money.
Yes, but she's fortunate to have the money to do that.
Well, it's a risky strategy that Stacey Abrams is doing. I mean, I think, yes, in campaigns, you should be having money poured into digital and social media. I still think in Georgia, for both parties, retail politics still means a lot. And you have to go out to all of the counties and you rev up your base, as we all know. And I think they're both doing that. That's my point.
I think everybody's doing that.
But you know, we all have been involved in watching campaigns. You've got to be careful about running out of money at the last minute if there's last minute attacks. So that's why I say it's very risky if the coffers are empty for any candidate at the end.
Karen, do you think the Democrats have raised enough money? You look at Casey Cagle, he's raised $7 million. Stacey Abrams has raised more money than I thought she would if you'd asked me a couple of years ago. Certainly credible. Stacey Evans, certainly credible. But the Republican totals are much larger when you look at Cagle and Secretary of State Brian Kemp and so forth.
Well, I think the thing is, to Alexis' point, is that, you know, at a time where Stacey Abrams has raised, I think, roughly about 2.2, Stacey Evans actually has totally raised 2.3, but it really boils down to actually the money on hand. And at a time where Stacey Evans actually has about $1.5 million on hand, and is also 90% of her money actually came from people in Georgia, where I think Abrams raised a lot more of her money outside the state, which is nothing wrong with that, but I think it was, you know, upwards to maybe 30%. But the thing that's so important to your point, Dick, is that when you look at Casey Cagle, and I think Clay Tippins kind of hinted on this in his recent ad, is that it's just nothing that you can really do when someone has been in a statewide office as long as Casey Cagle has, that he can go to these networks and raise that much money. And so I think what you're going to really see in our primary is, to Phil's point, who's going to have the money in the end to basically make sure that the voters are getting their messages. But I think what you're also going to see is that with Evans giving herself $1 million, she also knows that Abrams is going to continue to raise a lot of money. But I think that what's going to be very key is that if Abrams continues this burn rate that she's going, which is a very high one, I think we all agree, whether it's strategic or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Will she have enough money in the end, where at a time where Evans will have enough money to close? But ultimately, I think what you're going to see is that what we saw in the Ossoff race and other races across the country is that Democrats are fired up. And if we get the right nominee that actually has a valuable chance of trying to take out the Republican nominee, I think we won't have a money issue.
I want to real quickly mention.
Let me mention, though, just for the viewers, what we're talking about on the primaries. Both parties are having a primary on May 22nd. So I think that's very important. And you've got a lot of nonpartisan judicial races. A lot of people are asking questions, when is the date, and are the judges on the ballot? And the answer is yes, the judges are on these all-party ballots.
Right. You mentioned Tippins, Clay Tippins from Marietta, and you mentioned, we didn't mention Hunter Hill, but both of those Republican candidates were up on TV this week. Yeah. I'm not sure of the effectiveness, but the common denominator of both commercials was there were characters made to look like and dress like, sort of, Casey Cagle.
Is that right?
You know, I think it's great to get on TV, and the qualifying of the candidates starts in March, so things are going to move very fast. Although I think strategically it was a mistake, because you want to put your opponent on there after they've said or done something. And just to put an opponent up there, I think it's a little early. I think you should.
It's an in-joke.
Do some.
Like an in-joke.
Yeah, I think you should be introducing yourself.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, well, I just want to say one final thing about Stacey Abrams is utilizing social media very well, and she has found a clip of herself when she was 19 years old at the 40th anniversary of the March on Washington, and it's merged in with her current status. And she
found it, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm saying, well, it was on C-SPAN.
It's like Bill Clinton's picture with John Kennedy.
Yeah.
It just happened to have that line.
All
right, we got to get out.
Found that yet?
No, we haven't.
We got to get out when we come back. We'll switch over to winners and losers.
I'm sure your people are looking for it, though, Bill.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we've all promised to talk quickly in this segment. Phil,
you know,
civility
versus hatred. Representative Bee Nguyen is from Atlanta, a Democrat, and she was in a Twitter rant with one of her left-wing supporters, an idiot named Brent Jorgensen, and they were talking and attacking Senator Josh McCoon, the Republican, and they were laughing and talking about, oh, he's, I'm going to quote from a tweet, needs to focus on his weight, heart attack, oh good, hate him. You know, this is the most irresponsible type of talk, wishing somebody was dead. And I think there's a lot of fine Democrats in the Democrat caucus. I think they need to condemn this Brent Jorgensen and the silence of Bee Nguyen.
Bee Nguyen, she's new, too. She needs to speak down.
My winners are the Georgia Bulldogs. You know, they had the top recruiting class for this year. So Nick Saban better be careful.
All right.
Darren.
Ryan Cameron, 27 years in radio, has decided that he's going to leave V103. Had the top morning show, so definitely want to give him a big shout out. We're going to miss him. I mean, I've known him for a long time.
Frank Ski coming back and
so you have Frank Ski, who's going to this week start as the new host with Wanda Smith and Miss Sophia.
And now that was the top-rated morning show in its heyday.
But Ryan deserves a lot of accolades, and I wish him the best in his new venture.
Okay, Alexis.
I'm going to salute the Mayor Bottoms and the Atlanta City Council for eliminating cash bonds for nonviolent offenders.
Correct.
And just because you're poor, you don't have to sit in jail anymore. You can get out on your own recognizance, so that's a good thing. And then finally, Amy Sherald, a native of Columbus, Georgia, has been named the 2018 Driscoll Prize recipient from the High Museum, and she'll be celebrated at a dinner in April.
All right. I think we have to get out, so I've already told you my loser for this week or any week. That would be the DeKalb County Commissioners who want to raise their pay. It's a part-time job, folks. Stick with it. But the good news, spring training opens this week. Still may be a little
And
chill.
happy birthday to Alexis.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday, Alexis.
Yes.
Gosh, let's not start that. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.